All right, we are in. Okie dokie. So we are going to start with the agenda. All right, so welcome back from spring break. If you are here, which is only Emily as of right now, welcome. So today we're going to actually start talking about Romeo and Juliet. We're going to learn a little bit about Shakespeare and the Globe Theater. So what you'll need to do first is you should have your agenda sheet open. You should complete the Do Now slide on the next page first. So our goals for today are going to be you can comprehend information about Shakespeare and Romeo and Juliet, and you can define new vocab. So there are 2 assignments that will need to be done by, I think I have it scheduled for Thursday. There will be more work posted on Wednesday, but that's not due until Friday. So I kind of extended the dates a little bit. So the first thing you'll need to do is a Do Now. Then you're going to follow along with me while we do the introduction to Romeo and Juliet notes, and then we'll work on the vocab sheet. So I'll kind of go over it. If you have any questions and you want to keep your camera and your mic off, there is a chat function, and when you send a chat message, I'll be able to, it'll make a sound and I'll be able to hear it. As of right now, I can't see the actual like Google Meet thing. So you can unmute yourself and ask me a question verbally if you want, but it's totally up to you. Okay, so our question of the day is, how long should you date someone before getting married? And is it acceptable to get married after dating for 2 months? So to put this into context, Romeo and Juliet has a lot to do with love and young love in relationships, and like very fast love, something that's very quick and new and just kind of happens, and it's very sudden. To put this into further context, this is always a funny story that I have with one of my closest friends, who's also one of my bridesmaids. Her parents met after her dad had been divorced for about 2 years. He had a really bad relationship with his first wife. It was bad news. She wasn't sane. But so he met my friend's mom, and 4 months they were engaged, and a month after that they were married. Or no, I guess it was like 2 or 3 months after that they were married. Very fast, very fast. But it worked out. Like, they're a great couple. So I guess it kind of depends. Feel free, it's completely your opinion. You can write whatever your little heart desires, and we'll move forward. Okay. So you should have, just so you know, you should have these notes open. It says Introduction to Romeo and Juliet Notes. It starts with the Shakespeare biography. So when you're filling in the blanks, you can do it however you want. But the easiest way is if you double click on the blank, it'll highlight the whole thing, and then you can type like, I don't know if this is right, but I think it might be like that. Okay. All right. So we're going to go through, and I'll tell you. So everything should be kind of listed by the slides, like in the same order as the slides. It's the same thing that we've kind of done recently. Okay, so I'm going to present this bad boy. Okie dokie. So Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. This is actually the cover of what's called the first folio. So Shakespeare never actually published any of his own plays. He actually just wrote the parts out for his players, and the players would then perform the show. Oftentimes they would get their parts, they would memorize it, they would rehearse it right before they would go on, and then they would perform. There would really only be like one group rehearsal, and then they would perform the show. Pretty cool. I actually saw, I think it was last summer, a version of Macbeth in which they performed it in that way. Everybody got their parts. They were all memorized. They provided their own costumes and everything. And then they showed up the day before their show weekend and they performed it as a group and then they went on. Very cool, very interesting. So this folio is actually combined by other people. The players in his troupe actually got together and put this together, like wrote everything down, provided their scripts that they still had, because he never put them together. Okay, so Shakespeare, I was absolutely wrong, 1692. Shakespeare was born in 1564 in Stratford-upon-Avon in England. So the first two lines should be 1564, Stratford-upon-Avon. He died April 23rd, 1616, which is actually his birthday, estimated birthday. We don't really have a lot of solid information about Shakespeare. He left school at the age of 15 and never pursued further formal education. So he went to school until he was maybe the end of his freshman year, maybe partway through his sophomore year of high school. And everything he did after that was just totally him. He decided he wanted to be a writer, and that's what he did. He married a woman named Anne Hathaway at the age of 18. So he was 18, she was 8 years older. She gave birth to their first daughter 6 months later. Takes 9 months to have a baby. So they probably got married because she got pregnant. Okay. Oh, I can go back as needed. I'll wait for a little bit. Okay. After 5 years of marriage, Shakespeare moved to London and began working at the Globe Theatre, where his plays would soon be performed. He was actually part of this troupe called the Lord Chamberlain's Men. He was pretty much like the golden child of the king, like the king and queen. Like they loved him and they loved his plays, and he would specifically perform plays for them. He was known as the Bard or Poet of Avon. He wrote 37 plays in total, a lot. The plays really made him money. I'll just leave it at that. He pumped out plays. Like they would do something different at pretty much every weekend. And they would have a rotation of them. And he would cast different people in them. All right. He retired and moved back to Stratford-upon-Avon in 1611. And he died after a night out drinking with some friends. The huge. His plays were performed but not published during his lifetime. They were first published in 1623. So he died in 1611, and then his plays were published in the first folio in 1623. Pretty sad to die after having a really good time. I guess there's worse ways to die. Kind of suspicious, though. I think it's a conspiracy. I'm just kidding. I don't know what I'm saying. Okay, ready? So this is the Globe Theatre. It's super cool. You can actually still go today. It's not obviously the first Globe Theatre. It has lights. It has seats. It has, it is an open theater though. So if you look here, this at the top, it's a big circle. So right in the middle, there's no ceiling. All of these people here are standing. In Shakespeare's time, they would be called the groundlings. They're the peasants. They pay not even a penny, a halfpenny. A halfpenny is, I don't know, it's less than a penny. Really cheap seats. But so the cool thing about Shakespeare's plays is anybody could go. So peasants could go, and they could stand here, and they can also stand along the sides. There were also seats right up here, and the seats that are up here would have been reserved for nobles. There's also seats here. However, I think for the most part nowadays, those are actually used by the players, so by the actual actors. So they would do staging up there. Also, all around the sides. So if the stage is here, you can kind of stand on 3 sides. Very different from a stage that you would see like in our auditorium at Overbrook, where it's just kind of the stage is here, and then you sit on this side. You don't surround the stage. In this case, you surround the stage, and there's seats that go all the way around. So all the way around here. The higher up you go, the more expensive the seats are. Keep in mind, that's a lot of people, and they're packed in. And it's the 1600s, where hygiene isn't really a thing. They smell really bad. So the nobles are going to want to sit up higher where there's less people and where they're clean. So there's less stench. That's really what they're paying for. They're paying for to be away from the stinky peasants. Better seats. Nowadays, obviously, like most everyone has good hygiene habits. So if you stand on the floor, it's not as big of a deal, and you get cheap standing room to see a great play. Okay, so the theater in Shakespeare's day, everything had to occur during the day because there was no electricity, no lighting, and they had to use natural light. They would also use mirrors as a way to reflect the light coming in. So in that center of the Globe Theater, the natural light would come in. They would have specifically placed mirrors so that way they could reflect and shine on the actors. There were no scene changes. So whereas if you've seen a play at Overbrook or at your middle school, you would see like stage crew come on and change the scene. There's different props and things that move on and off. Props were very minimal, and they would really only be used to indicate that characters were changing. So actors would play multiple characters because there would be a lot of characters, and so they would change the costume and they would change the props. Like I said, poor spectators stood in the pit surrounding the stage, and the wealthier spectators paid for the better seating. The theater brought together British citizens from all social classes. So again, very cool. The peasants, the noblemen, and the very, very wealthy, including the king and queen, all came together to watch these shows. Pretty neat. Okay. Fun facts about the Globe. They used different flags to advertise to the people what type of plays were being shown. So there were 3 types of plays. There were tragedy plays, which were represented by black flags, history plays, which were represented by red flags, and comedy plays, which were represented by white flags. So tragedy would mean that there would be some great character or characters. They're at the tippy top of their game. They're peaked. And then there's something wrong with them, something that they do that's so devastatingly bad that by the end of the play, they completely fall. So it could be to their death. It could be just to their downfall. Maybe they're imprisoned forever. It varies. The history plays were pretty much that. They were history of England, history of Scotland. Shakespeare often twisted the facts. So if you ever encounter any of the history plays, Julius Caesar, which you should next year, Julius Caesar would be one of them. He kind of twists some things to make it dramatic. It's his thing. He's a dramatist. And then comedies. So they're funny. There would always be kind of little shticks going on. There's one play in which there's 2 sets of twins with the same names, and they get mixed up and confused, and it's a good time. The comedies really are funny if you're into actually reading them. No women performed in the plays. It was considered too risque, too scandalous for a woman to perform on the stage at the time. So all female roles were played by young boys. So probably boys around the age of like 12 to maybe 18. So they would have to be like young and slender, and they would have to have a higher voice. So if they were around the age of 12, maybe a little younger than that, their voice hasn't changed yet, so they can do the female voice. They would kind of put like makeup on them, and like it's really like one of the funniest things. I don't know that any playing companies actually still do this. I'm sure there might be, but if you go to the Globe, you're going to see women on stage. The bubonic plague actually shut down the Globe twice to prevent the spread. I felt like that was a fun fact considering the pandemic we're in. That's shut down all theaters in the US and Broadway. The Globe also burnt down completely in 1613 when a cannon used for special effect caught the thatched roof on fire. So they were doing, I think it was Henry IV, and they had a cannon, and they fired the cannon, like blank, no cannonball, just it was a blank, but it kind of, it's still gunpowder. So gunpowder flies out, hits the roof, and the roof is made out of straw. Straw is pretty flammable because it's dried grass. So it hits that, and the whole thing burns down. But nobody got hurt. I think one person got hurt, and it was very, very minor. Everyone got out safely. It was a rehearsal, so they all kind of figured it out. But it was rebuilt in 1614 at the same spot. So the Globe that you would go to now has obviously been renovated, but it's still there. It's the Globe. Very neat. Okay, so some vocab to know. This is going to take you a little longer because it's all blanks on your sheet. So a drama is a story written to be acted for an audience. So the Romeo and Juliet itself is a play. So in normal circumstances, if we were in school, I would be more inclined to have us read the actual play. So it would look like a script. Everyone would kind of pick a role, and we'd go from there. Instead, we're going to be reading this guy, which is a graphic novel. So it looks like a comic book. I was ripping pages out of it, so that way I could copy it. Make PDF files for you guys. So it looks like a comic book. The words are easier to read. They have the same kind of rhythm to them as what Shakespeare would have written. But I really like the visuals of them, and these graphic novels specifically, I've used this for Macbeth too, are really good. Okay, so drama. Tragedy depicts serious and important events in which the main character or characters come to an unhappy end. So a tragedy will have some comedic moments in it to kind of make the audience kind of loosen up a little bit. But for the most part, a tragedy is tense. You feel like something's going to happen, something's wrong. This just needs to end the whole time, and then you finally get to the end, and you're like, "Oh, thank goodness." It's heavy. Tragedies are always, I don't know, they're great. Tragedies are wonderful. A prologue, so a short introduction at the beginning of the play that gives a brief overview of the plot. So most of Shakespeare's plays at the time did this. Romeo and Juliet on the very first page will pretty much give us the whole plot without the details. So it'll tell us the setting, the conflict, the thing that furthers the conflict, and pretty much the end. But again, we don't get the specific details. So it kind of draws us in, but we have to do the work. Comic relief, so funny scenes and or characters that release some of the pent-up tension of the play. There are always specific characters that kind of do this. There's one character in the play that just makes puns the whole time. The whole time. Every time somebody says something, he's like, oh, blah, 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 I'm so funny. And like everyone around him is like, just kind of ignores that he does it. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty funny. I'll wait here for a second so you guys can get that down. Obviously, you don't have to write it word for word. Write it so that way you understand it. So if you think that this is too long, like, sum it up. Okay, I'm going to move forward. Okay, so these are going to be the different types of ways in which the characters in the play communicate information. So the first way is called a monologue. It's a speech by one character in the play. It's going to be made, I don't like the way that's written. It's going to be made to other characters. So a monologue is kind of like what I'm doing right now. I'm the only one speaking. I'm kind of making a speech, and I'm talking to an audience. I'm not talking to myself. I'm talking to a camera and Emily and eventually everyone else. But so it's a long speech. So it's going to be anything that you see that's like very dramatic, or Romeo monologues a lot. Romeo, you'll see. Romeo is pretty much the definition of an emo kid at the very beginning. It's pretty funny, honestly. Okay, a soliloquy is similar in that it's a long speech, but it's made by a character who either is or believes they are alone. This is kind of debatable because this believes they are alone thing would kind of make it a monologue. But a soliloquy is normally functions to have the character voice their thoughts. So in a play, you can't see inside characters' heads. It's not like in a book where we have a narrator that's going to tell us what's going on inside characters' heads. So we need a way to hear the character's thoughts. So oftentimes it's going to be like secrets, or they're trying to answer a question that's been really bothering them, and so they're going to do it by thinking out loud. And I mean, I do this. I talk to myself all the time because that's kind of how I work through things sometimes. Or I like talk at something. So sometimes I talk at my animals and I'm like, okay, like this is what I need to get done this week, okay? And they obviously don't answer back, but soliloquy. So monologue, long speech, talking to another character. Soliloquy, long speech alone reveals thoughts. Okay. An aside, on the other hand, is words that are spoken by a character in a play to the audience or to another character, but the words aren't heard by others on stage. So that would be like if, say, I was talking to somebody. So I'm with a friend, right? Me and this friend, we'll call him Bill, are, hanging out, we're talking, we're having a good time, and Joe comes over. So it's Joe, me, and Bill. Joe says, hey, what's good? And I'm like, hey, what's up? And then I lean over and I'm like, I hate this guy. I hate this guy so much. He doesn't hear me, but Bill does. And Bill snickers. He's like, that's an aside. Me saying something to Bill that Joe didn't hear is an aside. Sometimes it'll be like, there is no other person here. Joe comes over and I'm like, oh, I hate this guy. Out loud. He doesn't hear me though, but the audience would hear me. Still an aside. You don't necessarily have to have a person that's actually listening to you say the aside, but it's short things. That's the difference between like the soliloquy and the aside, is that it's short. It's short and sweet. It's not a long speech. It's not like Joe comes over and I'm like, oh, how I hate Joe. He is the one true villain in my life. Like, I'm not. It's like, I hate Joe. So how's your day going? Like, you go right back into the conversation. Short and sweet. So monologue, speech by one character in the play, two other characters. Soliloquy, speech by one character to himself aloud, reveals thoughts. Aside, short quips, essentially. They're little witty, clever remarks that either only the audience hears, or the audience and one character hears and the other characters don't hear. Okay. So, literary elements. A pun, my favorite kind of jokes. It's a play on the multiple meanings of a word, or on two words that sound alike but have different meanings. So the example that they give is an example from Shakespeare. So it's, ask for me tomorrow and you shall find me a grave man. So grave as in a grave, like you're dead. You'll find me dead. Or grave as in serious and solemn. So play on words. Other ways of doing that would be like, here, I'm going to actually look one up. So one way of doing that could be quality. My puns are quality. Quality, get it? Sounds similar. Also things like, I'm so punny. That would be an example. There's plenty of examples. I make puns all the time because I think they're funny. They're kind of lame, but I love them. Okay. A metaphor is a comparison of two unlike things without the use of like or as to show a deeper meaning. So a metaphor would be like, it's raining cats and dogs outside. Is it actually raining cats and dogs outside? I sure as heck hope not, because that's a big problem. I don't know what's doing that. But it's to show that it's raining really hard outside. It's a comparison, like raining and cats and dogs are not two things that really go together. A simile would be similar to that in that it's a comparison of two unlike things, but it uses like or as. So it'd be like it's raining cats and dogs outside. Like that. Okay, because I used like. Foreshadowing, the mention or hint of what is to come later in a story or play. Lots of different things do this. You'll find out, you'll see maybe there's thunder and lightning in the beginning of a scary movie, so you know that bad things are going to happen. Maybe think Final Destination, like that's the foreshadowing. All of these people are going to die in these ways. Interesting, cool. And then you find out how. Like there's foreshadowing's great. It's especially fun if you watch a movie and then you rewatch a movie and you're like, oh, foreshadowing. I didn't see before. Irony is when the opposite of what you think will happen happens. It can also be dramatic irony in which the audience knows something that the characters on stage don't. So maybe it's like a scary movie when there's a person hiding behind the door and then the person walks towards the door and you're like, no, don't go towards the door. That's dramatic irony. And then the person opens the door and then the scary person kills them or whatever. Dramatic irony. Oh, wait a sec. Okay, this is just a quote. Meet the characters. So Juliet, this is wrong. Juliet is 14, not 13. That's just a lie. She is 14 years old. She's the daughter to Lord and Lady Capulet. She's a bit naive. She's 14. So she's sheltered by her parents. She's on the brink of maturity. So she's a rich girl. She's kept safe because she is A, female, B, very pretty, and C, the daughter of noblemen. So, are noble persons. So that makes her kind of vulnerable to society. Men want to marry her because they would want to get into the Capulet family. Capulets have money. Marry into the family. she's also young, so it would be pretty easy to kind of convince her. I'll leave it at that. Romeo is the son of Lord and Lady Montague. So here's our initial problem. The Capulets and the Montagues are feuding. They do not like each other at all, to the point of violence. Juliet is on one side, Romeo's on the other. We can kind of assume that since this is called Romeo and Juliet and there's two people kissing on the cover, that they like each other. We'll get there. Romeo's age is not specified, but he's most likely in his late teens, early 20s. So he's probably like 18, 19, maybe 22 in that age. So like 18 to 22. He is a romantic. He falls in love like that. He bounces around too. Like he'll go from I love you to I love you to I love you. He's like kind of all over the place. When we first meet him, he's lovesick over Rosaline, a woman who refuses to love him back. I love that. Refuses. When he sees Juliet, he immediately forgets Rosaline and falls in love with Juliet on sight. Juliet's nurse is a very talkative and bawdy, middle-aged woman who raised and nursed Juliet from infancy. So she's kind of the rough and tumble, like not afraid to say what she means kind of person. She works for the Capulets. So she's lower class, so she kind of has lower class manners. She assists Romeo and Juliet in their plans to be married and serves as comic relief. She's very funny. We'll talk about her when we meet her. Friar Lawrence is a man of God who gardens and has extensive knowledge of herbs. He marries Romeo and Juliet, so he helps too. So the nurse and Friar Lawrence both help. And then there's some minor characters. So Mercutio is the guy that makes the puns all the time. He's a witty friend of Romeo's. He often serves as comic relief. Benvolio is a cousin of Romeo's. Tybalt is a cousin of Juliet's. And he's known for his skill with the blade and his fashion sense. Tybalt is stylish as heck. Benvolio and Tybalt kind of end up being like counters to each other. So Benvolio is like a really good friend of Romeo's and really tries to help him out. Tybalt is close to Juliet. So they're kind of the two main players of the Montague and the Capulet side. And finally, we have Paris. So he's related to the Prince of Verona. So he's kind of, the Prince of Verona is the, like he's the guy that's in charge. He comes in at the very beginning and like makes everyone stop fighting. Like he's got power. Paris is related to him, so by blood, like they're family. And he's trying to get Lord Capulet to allow him to marry Juliet. So Paris is interested in Juliet. Romeo's interested in Juliet. Romeo was interested in Rosaline. Complicated. The setting is in Italy. So we're in the city of Verona, Italy. So in the 14th century during the Renaissance. So during the Renaissance, great things are happening. There's all of this. It should be like awesome. Everything in Italy should be great. There should be art and music and poetry and writing and flourishing. Everything should be flourishing. But there's this feud. And the feud is kind of what puts a stick in that Renaissance. Culturally, marriages are arranged. So women are seen as property passed from their fathers immediately into the possession of a husband. So it's not really the woman's choice who she gets to marry. Lord Capulet is kind of nice in that Paris wants to marry Juliet and Lord Capulet's like, yeah, I like you, but she's 14. Like, maybe, like, you know, flirt with her and see what happens. If she decides she wants to marry you, okay. So he's kind of like nice about it. He doesn't want to marry her off too early and whatever, but it's at the end of the day, it's not really her choice. She doesn't really get to pick who she wants to marry. And And the families of Montague and Capulet have been feuding for years and hate each other. So the feud is long. It's not like it just started. It's been going on forever. Lord Montague and Lord Capulet are old, very old. I mean, old for the time, so it could be honestly like they're 60, like maybe younger than that, who knows? But they're supposed to be like really old. I think the feud started like before then, a long time. And that's the end of the notes. So if you need to get any of the other notes, you'll have to go back into the video when I post it and go from there. I'll briefly explain the vocab. So let me pull this up. So vocab for Romeo and Juliet. I gave you the first one, I already filled out. So the words are all on the left side. I gave you the words and the part of speech. So you have to find the definition and 2 synonyms for each one. I also gave you example sentences for each one. So underneath each one. So that way you can go down here to part 2 and fill in the blanks. That's weird that I only picked 4. There should be a 5th one. Whatever, I screwed up, I guess. You get an easier time. So your words are, the first one is quarrel, it's a noun. It's a heated argument or disagreement between 2 or more people, typically about a meaningless issue. So it can also be known as an argument or a disagreement. The 2 men had gotten into a quarrel over whether Iron Man or Captain America was a better hero. Kind of pointless. In terms of Romeo and Juliet, the quarrel is between the Capulets and the Montagues. A hothead is an adjective. Squidward, it's not an adjective. A hothead is a noun. Squidward Tentacles is a hothead that gets angry at just about anything SpongeBob does. Muddled. Yeah, okay. Muddled is an adjective, so it describes something. When I throw a ball too far, Franklin becomes muddled because he only has one eye. So he can't really find it. He gets a little, he looks around, he walks around in circles. Chastity is a noun. All nuns take a vow of chastity and will never have sex or will never have sex again. Woo. So this isn't like the woo sound. This is to woo. So it's a verb. Men often woo women by buying them chocolate and flowers. And finally, trifling. This is an adjective. Hint, it does not mean shady or sneaky or out of pocket. That's the slang definition. Trifling or trifles is something different. So you have to look it up. This, you can delete this if you want, but this is still where you put the definition. I really can't stand arguments about trifling things because it feels like a waste of time. And then you'll have the fill in the blank questions. So the fill in the blank questions are, due to COVID-19 closures, I've been sad about missing out on blank events that are less important than staying safe. My mom works at Wegmans in Mount Laurel and has gotten into blanks with customers about following the social distancing rules. Male penguins will blank female penguins by bringing them little pebbles for their nest. And finally, Justin Bieber is a blank and has attended anger management classes. Parentheses, he once had to pay $80,000 because he threw eggs from his house at his neighbor's house. He is a psycho. Okay, so if you guys have any questions, just let me know. Post questions to Google Classroom, send me remind texts, whatever you need. And that'll be it. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to click Stop Presenting, and that's all. So this will be posted on Google Classroom shortly. Alrighty, toodaloo.